It's the Locked On Flyers podcast for Wednesday, February 19th, your daily dose of Flyers news, analysis, and high quality content that is digging into the state of the Lehigh Valley Phantoms today.
Let's dig in.
You're Locked On Flyers, your daily podcast on the Philadelphia Flyers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, and thanks for making Locked On Flyers your first listen every day. I am Rachel Donner. I've been podcasting about the Flyers, the NHL, and hockey for a decade. I'm here with prospect expert and Flyers credentialed reporter for 19 years, Russ Cohen. To keep up with our latest episodes and Flyers news, you can find us at Locked On Flyers on all your favorite socials, and of course, here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We had an incredible conversation with Maddie Campbell of Broad Street Hockey about the Lehigh Valley Phantoms. She is one of the biggest experts on that team in the market. And so it was such a thrill to get her perspective on it. We'll get to that in a minute. But I think, the biggest news to come out of the Four Nations goings on Tuesday was the somewhat surprise announcement from USA head coach Mike Sullivan that Quinn Hughes was on his way to Boston to be an emergency replacement defenseman for Team USA.
Yeah, I was talking to somebody when I heard about McAvoy in the hospital and all, and I was thinking, I think I didn't think Quinn Hughes was healthy. And then if he was just healthy, I wasn't thinking that they would throw him right in. And he's far away. So I was thinking even someone like Nick Seeler could have a chance just because Torts knows him and he could, just play
Right.
bottom pairing and shot block and be physical if necessary. And that's the whole thing. Quinn Hughes is really just if necessary. And I'm going to just say it right now. These teams have been playing above board. So I don't expect there to be like this weird injury to let Quinn Hughes in.
Oh, like Sanderson's not feeling well or something like
Right.
that.
Right. But I will
Yeah.
say Slavin was shaking his hand as an example the other day, like he was hit with the puck. Hey, I don't know
Right.
what's going on with Jacob Slavin. I don't want the guy out of the lineup if I'm that team, but could be him. Doesn't have to be Jake Sanderson.
Yeah, we'll see what happens there. As of recording, we don't have a definitive answer yet. They're probably not going to talk about lineup changes until after morning skate today. So we will talk about that and stay tuned to our socials. I'll update y'all from Boston on that front. And just a reminder about the Four Nations, we have a poll going over on our YouTube channel. There's a link to that poll in the show notes, and make sure you make your voice heard about what you think about the tournament and give us your extra thoughts in the comments as well. Without further ado, here's our talk with Maddie Campbell. All right, we are thrilled to welcome from Broad Street Hockey, Maddie Campbell, who is, I would say, one of the biggest Lehigh Valley Phantoms experts out there. She goes to games and knows everything inside and out about that team, which is very important to the Flyers development system. And Russ and I talk about the Phantoms every week on the show, and I think we have been exceedingly frustrated by this aspect of the Flyers organization. But just like big picture, do you think the Phantoms are where you expected them to be this season, results wise, or do you think that the organization had higher expectations given how they did in the playoffs last year?
Yeah, big picture wise, I did expect them to be a little better this season. I know they've had some injury situations, but like even with that taken into account, I think probably given the caliber of players they have to work with, they should be doing a little bit better. And it's a little frustrating because we definitely do see them looking really solid, strong in flashes, but the consistency is the big issue. And even we're well past the mid-season point, and they just haven't really figured that out still.
I mean, early in the season, we heard the Scranton coach saying Lehigh doesn't have a system. We've heard Torts say, well, they could do whatever they want because we're not running the same systems. Do you feel like that's problematic?
Yeah, and I mean, that's a new thing, right? Like, I think with past coaching staffs, they've made
Oh yeah, they always
pretty
match.
big point of running the same
Yes.
system to make everything easier on guys going up and down between levels. And I'm not really sure why they wouldn't be doing that now. But yeah, I think that's been a real sort of point of concern with the team for sure.
Yeah, I think it's a problem too when guys go up from the Phantoms to the Flyers because I think that it has been exceedingly rare for a Phantom to go up to the Flyers and have like a gangbusters performance. I would say
Yeah.
Emil Andre has come the closest recently, but even his performance, like he's struggled to adapt to the system in Philadelphia to some degree, right?
Yeah, and I mean, even we were seeing it like this game that I just got home from today, where it just like doesn't quite seem like they 100% know what they're doing. They played Wilkes-Barre for the second time this weekend, and the Penguins were getting all of these cross seam passes through, and like nobody really seemed to know what to do with them. And it's like, well, you saw them on Friday. Like, surely we could have game planned for this. Like, that's not a surprise.
Right.
Like, I don't really know what we're doing here.
Yeah, when guys are sort of out of position and unsure, it's not great. But when you're the gap here that I don't think a lot of Flyers fans realize is, okay, if you want to say some of your top prospects are playing overseas and in the OHL, okay, there's, at least 3 guys you could think of in that, but there should be more in Lehigh that could be Flyers within the next 2 years. And, Samu Tuomaala would be one of those guys. I know he's out hurt right now, but he doesn't look like one of those guys yet. What's your feeling on all of that?
No, and it's weird because he's kind of following the exact same trajectory he did last season, where he started out really well and then like halfway through he just kind of falls off a cliff and then he gets
Yeah.
hurt again weirdly.
Yeah.
Hopefully this time it's
Yeah.
not really anything major. I haven't heard either way yet with him, but yeah, it is a little concerning. And I mean, we did know that he was going to be a bit of a project, considering the type of game he plays and the history he has at other levels overseas. But
But just score more goals. Like, that's really what they want
yeah,
out of the guy. What about
yeah,
that? I mean,
yeah. And he seems like one where it's just like when things are not going great for him, they sort of start to spiral a little bit, and just the rest of his game falls apart. And he hasn't really figured out a way to stop that from happening. And the coaching staff hasn't really figured out how to stop that either. I mean, they're trying things. I mean, they've been moving him around the lineup,
yeah.
playing him
Yeah.
with different types of
Almost too
players.
much, in my opinion.
I would agree. Yeah. But it's just, it hasn't quite clicked yet. I mean, it seems like the last couple of games he played were maybe getting there, but now he's hurt and there goes that momentum, which is a real shame.
So obviously, like the big thing about the AHL is having player development for your top prospects, right? So we just talked about Samu Tuomaala and his struggles, where it feels like it's partially on him and partially on the team because they don't know how to work with him. And when you have a full player development crew plus a full coaching staff that can't get him to do consistent improvement, to me, that's an organizational failure. And we've seen that with some other players that the expectations this year in particular have been much higher than they were in past years, and players were expected to take steps forward. And I would say J.R. Avon is exhibit A of that situation. And I would say Alexis Gendron is another example that nobody was really expecting Gendron to be like NHL ready, right? But to get closer. And it feels like it's kind of been a mixed bag with both of those guys.
Yeah, I think more so with Avon, and I think part of that is like he's still physically maturing. I think something you see with the very fast players is they can really clean up at the junior level just by being faster than everybody else and being able to beat guys one-on-one. Now he's like getting stood up at the blue line a little bit more frequently, and he has to figure out
Right.
how to,
Right.
pick his spots a little better. And, that's going to be an adjustment either way. But on the whole, I think Gendron's been better than I expected to start the season. I mean, I had some high hopes for him based on what we saw in his brief stint last season, but I think he's been, again, it's still like consistency is a bit of an issue there, but I
Right.
mean, he's kind of been doing everything that the coaching staff's been asking of him. He's scoring, I would say, about as much as you would expect from him at this point in his sort of development arc. But he's staying involved in play away from the puck when he's not scoring, which is, I know, a big point of emphasis that the coaching staff has had for him. So, I mean, I've been pretty pleased with what he's been doing this year.
We'll have more with Maddie coming up next. Looking for a snack that's both delicious and nutritious? Crack into a good source of protein with Wonderful Pistachios. Wonderful Pistachios is one of the highest protein nuts. Each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily value. Plus, they're packed with fiber and better for you unsaturated fats to keep you feeling fuller longer. Personally, I love the no shells varieties. It's the perfect grab and go snack for busy days and to have at my desk while I'm working. I had some friends over recently for a movie night, and instead of popcorn, we passed around bowls of a variety of flavors, which everyone loved. But the Wonderful Pistachios chili roasted no shells and the sea salt and vinegar no shells were the biggest hits by far. So delicious and healthy too. Wonderful Pistachios is a complete protein providing all 9 essential amino acids. These little green wonders pack a protein punch. Get snackin, get crackin with the snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. On tomorrow's show, we're going to talk about the latest with the Flyers and goals for the rest of the Flyers season. Flyers hockey is just around the corner to return. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to give our Four Nations final preview and predictions and talk about another NHL draft prospect out there. Here is more with Maddie on the Lehigh Valley Phantoms.
This part of the goaltending has bugged me, and I don't know if we have a resolution, but I feel like every organization needs like a long-term organizational goalie somewhere. And Felix Sandstrom was that guy. And I have no idea whether he wanted to leave or the Flyers didn't want to sign him, but he's won 7 in a row. He's having a heck of a year. I talk to people where he's playing. They love him. Great guy. We know him. Like, even if he was just going to be an AHL goalie for the next 3 years, that's fine, because at least you could count on him. Like, any idea why he wasn't brought back or didn't come back?
To be honest, I don't know.
Okay.
What the deal was there.
Do you feel like they're missing him though?
Maybe a little bit, but to be honest, I haven't really felt like goaltending has been the issue this season for the Phantoms, for as much flux as they've had to deal with. I think, everybody's had some bad games and you're going to get that. But for the most part, I think everybody's done a good job of stepping up when they've been called upon. Just like the one definite positive we could say.
I would say yes to some degree. I wouldn't say completely. I think the Kolosov question is still an important one, that like if he were developing in the AHL like he should be, then I think it would be less of a problem because there would be more consistency in the goaltending. I mean, obviously nobody could have predicted that McIniemi and Peterson would get hurt for longer term injuries, right? And so I think Parker Gahagan is doing the absolute best he can, and I think he's stepped up, especially recently, for sure. But I do think that it's led to the team having to play a slightly different way, and that also messes with things because, again, with their lack of a system, now they're having to make adjustments for random goaltenders. Like, they just don't know how to handle that. And I think they don't play well in front of the goalies sometimes because they just don't know how. They don't know how to adjust to different goaltenders sometimes.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And I mean, Lappy keeps making a point of saying, like, the guys are really battling in front of Gahagan. They're really trying, but like, he leaves a lot of rebounds. He's not the
Hmm.
cleanest, and I think they're doing what they can within the sort of confines of the system or lack thereof. But yeah, that's given all of that, it's going to be a little bit messy.
So some of the other players that I think are more on the positive side of things with the Phantoms here, obviously Jacob Gaucher getting the NHL contract was a huge deal for him, and I think that he's shown off pretty well in his games with the Flyers, and I think he's like one of the rare like good success stories here for the Phantoms. But like, where do you see his development in terms of like how much longer do you think he'll be more permanently like with the Phantoms, or is he ever going to be a permanent NHLer?
I don't know that I necessarily see him as a long-term NHL option. I think the lack of foot speed is going to hold him back at that level. I think he does really well at the AHL level with how smart he is and how well he sees the game, and he's able to overcome some of the speed issues and just get himself into the right positions. But everything just moves so much faster at the next level, and I don't know that he would be able to take advantage to the same degree that he is in the A. But I mean, he's taken a huge step forward, and that's been such a big boost for the Phantoms, who are pretty thin at the center position. So it's been really, really great to have him take that step forward.
So let's talk about something that frustrates me. And I think this player is really good. He's on the last year of a deal and doesn't get enough of a look in the NHL, maybe because, let's just say, maybe doesn't play exactly like a Torch style defense, but plays it really well. And that's Helge Grans. And I just feel like I could see him walking away at the end of the year, somebody snapping him up, and then him ends up playing in the NHL. And it just doesn't feel like the Flyers have that interest in doing that with him. Maybe it is John Tortorella. Maybe it's more. I don't know. What's your feeling on Grans? Because I think he's really developed.
I think what people kind of forget sometimes with talking about him is, like, he is still so young.
He
I
is.
mean, it's his 4th year in the league, but he's 23 at the end of the season, like, still so young. But yeah, I mean, the step forward he's taken this year has been pretty notable. I don't have a great sense of sort of where they stand with him. I think, they may have some favorites, and he might be outside of that.
Right. Because let me add it this way. I'll frame it this way. I'll
Yeah.
take a step forward and say what they did with Gaucher, I would have done with Grans already and had him
Okay.
locked up already based on what he has shown this year. Would you have done the same? I'm not
I
talking
would,
about long term, like 2 years.
yeah, I think I would be fine with that. But like you said, the sort of him not playing a Tortorella type game is maybe holding him back a bit. I also wonder if they're kind of putting all of their eggs in the Hunter McDonald basket,
Oh boy.
just in the pipeline.
Well, why don't we talk
Yeah,
about that? Because Rachel and I have felt that, Keith Jones had really overemphasized him and overhyped him for like the last year, and now he doesn't really talk about him. I think that has affected the player. Like, I think when you get all that adulation, it's hard to ignore it. So yeah, where do you feel Hunter McDonald's at?
it hasn't really been a super smooth adjustment to the AHL level for him. One thing that has sort of haunted me a little bit is, I think on one of the Flyers broadcasts recently, somebody said, like, "Oh yeah, we're getting really good reports on him for
Yeah,
how
yeah,
he's
I
playing
heard
down at
that.
the A." I'm like, that kind of
From
makes me feel
who?
insane.
Yeah,
Like,
Yeah, where'd they
who
come
is
from?
telling you that?
Right.
Yeah, but
totally.
I'm not totally out on him, but
No, I mean,
it
he's
just,
still a young guy, but he's not developing as quick as the report was going to be on him a year ago. I think that's fair to
yeah.
say.
Yeah, I think it still seems like things are kind of coming at him too fast, and he's trying to overcompensate with the physical side of his game, and it's just not really working. Um, I always felt like he was going to be more of a project. I don't really know where that
I felt
idea
that way
came
too.
from. Yeah.
And I think Rachel
Um,
did too.
yeah. Um, we'll see sort of where he stands at the end of the season, but I think he's another guy who's like really being hurt by the fact that they don't have much of a system.
Right.
Because like, how are you supposed to adjust to playing at the pro level if you don't have like a pretty rigid framework that you're supposed to be working within? I don't know. That's a tough one for him.
Yeah, and I also think it's having an effect on Adam Jennings because I feel like they're having McDonald do the things that Yinning would do well, and he's not getting those opportunities either. And it's like I think it's not helping either one of them with how they've decided to roll out their blue line this season.
I feel bad, but Jennings is kind of disappearing a little bit in games for me.
Hmm.
I mean, not that he ever plays like a particularly high event game, but even taking that into account, like it's not been great. But I mean, tonight he set up Avon's goal, I think. He set up a goal and he was
Okay.
activating on the rush, and it was one of those like, whoa, you really can do that. Like we can see some more from you than what we've been seeing so far. But we're just not getting, I think, enough of that, which is a shame because, there's more in his toolkit, I think, than just being the sort of low event shutdown guy.
So let's talk about something else low event, and that is, look, this team might make the playoffs, but what irks me, and you cover all these games, and we just watch, most of the time we're just watching. Regulation wins. Regulation wins have been really hard to come by for this team, and Springfield's way ahead of them on that, and Hartford, I think, was one behind them in regulation wins, something like that. Why so few regulation wins? Why so many games going to overtime? What do you think that the reasons for that?
They're having to come from behind in a lot of games, which is a big issue. I don't know why this is happening, but it seems like they start pretty well. Like their first periods are generally pretty good, and then they just drop off after the first intermission, and then they have to, scrape and claw their way back, which is, not exactly a winning formula.
And that's what they just did in the game against Wilkes-Barre, right? That 4-3 loss. They kind of followed that model.
Yeah.
Yeah, they get so close and then no. Especially in the last game of the week or the weekend. Like they cannot win the last game of the week ever, it seems like.
Yeah, and tonight you could definitely tell like this is the third game of a 3-3. They looked pretty gassed, pretty like loosey-goosey with the puck. It wasn't great.
So, like in a perfect world, like what is your plan for the Phantoms as it relates to the Flyers rebuild?
I don't know. Something I've been thinking about, and we kind of talked about this when I was on the PHLY pod earlier this week. Their next season, they'll be heading into the last year of LePerrier's contract, and I think something they're going to have to reckon with as an organization is clearly they value his player development, what he's doing. We can disagree with that, but it seems like the organization very much thinks that he's doing a good job. But they're going to have to decide, like, do you also want your prospects to be not only like we would say developing a little more smoothly, but also winning? Like, is it valuable for you to have your prospects learning how to play winning hockey? I think they're trying to build a competitive team down here, but it's just not really clicking for them. So I think they're going to be at an interesting crossroads here. I know the direction I would go. I'm trying to be delicate about it, but yeah.
No, I mean, I get it. It is a big question. I think that you do need to have like your prospects develop, but you need to have them win because they need to experience joy and have motivation, right? Like winning is helpful, I think, in prospect development. And it's hard when it's every game is a struggle. And I get it, but it's a really tough thing. And you've seen like other organizations, and you look at Hershey, for instance, which is a very consistent, very successful team feeding into a very consistent, very successful Washington Capitals. And I think that would be a great thing to have for the Flyers, which I think they did have back in the day when the Phantoms were playing in Philly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I mean, it's about building good habits too. I mean, how many times have we heard Lappy after these games say like, we stopped competing, we stopped winning our battles. You know, it's valuable for the prospects to learn how to, you know, not do that within the sort of scope of trying to win games rather than just like tinkering with the finer points of their game on an individual level. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Maddie, do you feel like there's a lack of like AHL trades with this club? Like, they're signing some free agents, that's fine. But, there are other teams making AHL swaps, it seems almost daily, for at least for the last month. Flyers haven't been doing any of that. And it kind of makes me wonder, like, why not? Why not try to bolster things there? Why not look around at other organizations and find some players that you like that you could tell need a change from another organization that might be able to do well here that still fit your mold of what your rebuild is? Do you feel like they're lacking in that?
It's a good question. Maybe some. I mean, I think you look at like the caliber of free agent or the type of free agent that they went and got in the summer, and that tells you, yeah, they're trying to build something competitive here. But yeah, now that you mention it, like the fact that they're not really committed to doing any sort of tinkering on that level within the season maybe tells you something. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's a lot that could be done with Lehigh Valley, but we'll see how this season uh, pans out if they in fact do make the playoffs, and maybe if they can make a little mini run like they did last year, that would be encouraging to a lot of the Flyers prospects. But I think we have a lot to look forward to from you, Maddie, as far as your reporting on the team. So where can people find you out there?
You can find me writing over at Broad Street Hockey and also over at PHLY. Um, I'm like barely on the socials, so like keep it to the websites.
All right, sounds good. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll have to have you back in the off season to talk about getting ready for next year as well.
Anytime. Thanks,
Thanks.
guys.
Once again, thanks to Maddie Campbell for visiting us to talk about the Phantoms. Like, we harp on how important that team is to the organization and really our strong feelings about how it's being used as a prospect development tool. So it was really good to get Maddie's input on that as well.
It was. I mean, that's why we go to the expert. We certainly do our due diligence, but yeah, she's right on it all the time. So it's good to get that extra perspective.
Absolutely. All right. Well, we're going to have your mailbag questions, which are varied, all about foreign nations, prospect development, and more coming up next. Diving right into our Locked On Flyers mailbag, Scott sent us an email asking if we think the foreign nations results went as expected in the round robin.
Uh, I think so. I actually do. I think they did go as expected. Of course, sometimes it takes a circuitous route and probably wasn't expecting the U.S. to lose to Sweden, but it really didn't mean anything in the grand scheme of it. So, yeah, I think it did go as expected.
Yeah, I think we got to the place we expected. I think, the path may have been a little off, but
Right.
we did get there in the end. I might have expected Sweden to beat Finland, but then lose to USA, you
Yeah.
know, as maybe a slight difference there. But yeah, I think USA versus Canada for the final is what the NHL wanted, and it's what they got. So I am excited for it. We'll talk about it then. Joe commented on our prospect update as it relates to the rebuild and said they actually need to lose enough to pick in the top 5 for a couple of times. And I think this rebuild is so baffling, I think, to a lot of people because like the Matvey Michkov coming early of it all really threw a wrench into people's expectations, I
Hmm.
think, in terms of does it accelerate it or does it just change it? But Danny Briere and Keith Jones have been very, very adamant and beating the drum of it not really changing anything, and that there is a deliberate process that maybe will take longer, even with Michkov coming sooner. And I think that creates a schism in perception and belief there about how this rebuild should go. And then how that affects the idea of potentially soft tanking for higher draft picks, right?
Yeah, so I think you're right about the management part, but the coach certainly has not mentioned any of that. And so, like, that's the schism. It's created
Right.
because of the coach. And so, yeah, I think things have changed though. I don't think they changed on purpose. Like you said, you did a good job of illustrating. And I don't think Mitchkov advanced it enough. So, but I think they're gonna spend some money in free agency with the cap going up? I do. And I think that's the change. I think now they're going to do that because Mitch Cup's
Right.
there because they want to get a player with them. And
Correct.
so I think that does change things.
Yeah, so it makes it a lot harder or less convenient to try and soft tank to get one of those top 5 picks. Now, if they get one this year, would that be incredible? Yes. Is it likely to happen another year beyond this one? Almost none,
Right.
right?
Most likely not.
Especially if they go out and sign a big free agent center or defenseman, which is
Right.
what they have been plotting to do, like with the big trade sending Frost and Farabee away, right?
Right.
They're
Yep.
creating cap space for that big signing. So the draft pick path, I think, is a little bit past itself beyond this year to a large degree.
Yeah. I agree.
So on our Matvey Michkov for Calder crossover that I did with our pals from Locked On Sharks and Locked On Canadiens, John commented that essentially, no, not if the voting was today, would Michkov win the Calder. The coach needs to let him be more creative, shoot more, score more. And then Brian commented underneath that, which I thought was interesting. It's not the coach's fault. His conditioning isn't at the level of an NHL player. He's got to hit the gym a lot this offseason, and then he'll be 1,000 times better. We haven't really talked about his conditioning at all on this
Okay.
show.
Here's what I would say about that. I'm not going to disagree that his conditioning is not the same as, let's say, someone like Quinn Hughes. But I'm also going to say Michkov, this is the same Michkov that was in Russia. So,
Right.
yeah, it's going to take time. Like, this is not something that happens overnight. Now, that doesn't preclude him from playing 17 minutes a night. It just should stop him from playing 11 because, yes, that would kill his Calder chances if he's only playing 11 or 12. I mean, I vote and I need to see more out of Michkov because guys like Dustin Wolf are doing great. Celebrini's doing great. Lane Hudson has as many points as a defenseman. So it's a crowded field. So, yeah, the best way to give him a chance would be to do exactly what you said. And as far as the conditioning, that's just going to happen over time because, again, he's a young guy, but look, do I think
He hasn't had a full NHL offseason with
right?
season conditioning, off-season conditioning,
But he was over here.
preparation.
He was over here, and maybe they could have done a little more with him. I think that's fair to say, but it's not the coach's issue. That's not. That's
No,
correct.
that is absolutely not the coach's fault. But yeah, I just think it's like an interesting aspect to his
It
development
is.
and why he may not be up there with those other players in the Calder conversation at this particular time, that he has all this tremendous skill. But right now, his adjustment to the NHL, like that's not enough to carry it through
Right.
for him to win a Calder. But yeah, I mean, it's a fascinating thing, and I look forward to him having like a full regular off season and
Yes.
come back next fall. Let's see what he looks like then. That'll be
Yeah.
the big question, I think. Our seeker commented, the Flyers don't have a culture or style, but they think that just switching out players and coaches will improve things. Since the end of the Ed Snyder era, it's been nothing but a string of random trades and chaos. And it's a really, I think, difficult thing because I think we have seen a string of, like, we saw Hextall had a plan. It didn't work. Like, he did have a plan. It just didn't
Well,
work.
they
And
also
I think
derailed his plan by saying you're taking too long. So
right.
that didn't help it either. It probably wasn't going to work, but we don't know for
Yeah.
sure. Like, I'm going to at least give that caveat. But yeah, you know.
Yeah, I just think like, we do have a good team culture right now
Yes, the culture
overall.
has changed. The rest
Danny Briere has
that's
a
battle
plan.
scars. That's battle scars.
Right.
It is. I
It's
get it.
it's difficult because I do think that other GMs had a system and had a plan. They either just failed, or to your point about Hextall, it was just a long haul plan. It wasn't a
Right.
short enough term plan for ownership, and that's what led to his demise. But I do think that it has felt chaotic, and I think that feeling is legit just
Yes.
because triggers have been pulled too soon a lot of the time or not soon enough in
Right.
other instances,
Right.
and that leads to the feeling of chaos.
Right. I would say that if you're saying, "Hey, I need to see more consistency out of the front office," I would agree with you.
No, absolutely. Lastly, Mike emailed Russ, always enjoy your draft rankings. If you would put it into tiers with the first round, how would you have it? Say, like the first 4 picks versus the next 10, etc.
Yeah, I've got 1 to 3, and this could change. Again, it changes as the players change. But right now, as my current list is out, I have 1 to 3, 4 to 10, 11 to 17, 18 to 25, 25 to 32. That's how I have it.
And we will leave that as a mystery as to who those people are in those
Or just go
numbers.
to my list, and you'll at least have an
Well,
idea of
that's
where I'm
true.
coming from.
In your most recent list, then
Yes,
you're
but
saying.
again, but it
Okay.
could change.
All right. Well, we will keep track of that, and when your next list comes out, we are absolutely going to talk about
That's
it.
a great question.
Oh, yeah, always love talking about prospects here. We will be doing that tomorrow, as well as the Four Nations final preview and Flyers goals for the rest of the season. And if you want your question answered on the show, like we just did, let us know through any of our socials at Locked On Flyers. You can email us at lockedonflyers@gmail.com or comment on our YouTube channel. I'm Rachel. I'm on Blue Sky and Twitter at rmiriam. That's RMIRIAM.
I'm Russ. I'm at Sportsology on the same socials, SPORTSOLOGY.
Thanks for making Locked On Flyers your first listen today. For your next listen, find Locked On Fantasy Hockey, become a fantasy hockey expert, get the edge over league mates with daily tips from Steal and Flip. Find Locked On Fantasy Hockey on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Have a great day, everyone.